words tell you that, but also one always sees the soul through the words that you write. If you're writing something that actually means something to you, you can look into that thing as a reader and say, hey, I see that person in there. Because you reveal yourself. You reveal yourself if you're writing about something you care about. So I started writing and I had these sort of asides of, my growing up or what I thought, I'm writing about why I'm obsessed about Lord of the Rings. Like, I have to put me in there. And so it was actually really liberating. And the cool thing about that is those pieces of the book are the pieces that I have been getting the most messages about. And I think I was probably scared all those years as a Nerdwriter because the more personal you get, the more vulnerable you are. When you put yourself on the page, you're opening yourself up to pain, essentially, if someone doesn't like it. But if you don't risk it, then you're also not risking a deeper connection. And so Neil Gaiman, again, he said you should always go one step more uncomfortable than you're willing to be. And so that's what I tried to do here, and I have gotten those responses of, this is something I relate to. And that has been so, so gratifying, and has not completely allayed the fear, but it makes it a little easier.
Well, we'll move away from the fear and move towards...
No, let's stick with the fear.
Yeah.
No.
One of the themes that runs throughout the book is the comfort item.
Yes.
Whether it's Lord of the Rings movies or cyberpunk, what are some of your comfort items at the moment?
Oh my God, so many. When I was writing this book, it was such heavy research on so much stuff that when I was done, all I wanted was to get lost in the book. So I was like, I need to read some fantasy. And the first fantasy I found was the Brandon Sanderson Cosmere novels. I don't know if any of you guys know that, but that's like 14 novels that I went through in a second. And it was just what I really needed at that moment, and it gave it to me. The other comfort item for me was my wife and I just moved into a new apartment. Interior design. I love it. I love to procrastinate. I don't know about you guys. I love that. And so if you have a house with things that need to get done and you have other things that are really important, working on the house is the best distraction from that stuff. So that has been my escape.
Is it blogs? Is it Pinterest? Is it Instagram? Is it HGTV?
It's everything. I hesitate to go into this because it could get very long. There's a website called floorplanner.com where you can design houses in 3D, and I spend a lot of time on there. Yeah.
It's
my next book. My next book. How to design your apartment.
I would take your advice.
Yeah. Thank you. Will you edit it?
I would be ill-equipped, but yeah. One of the things that I find as a reader, I often feel inundated with news and ideas that feel, and there's just so much coming at me, and I feel so overwhelmed. And as someone who gets the finer shades of meaning, how do you wade through the noise to find the real experts and how to listen?
You are the only one that feels overwhelmed by the news. No, it is the same. I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, that's why I mostly try to stay on social media, because it is so much noise, and it's very ephemeral. What I do is read JSTOR, and I have been super lucky that JSTOR have contacted me and gave me a free login. I know. If you know JSTOR, you know how cool that is. Biggest perk of doing YouTube. And that is all academic journals and scholarly articles. And the major issue with that is that it's behind this huge paywall. Like, the fact that these sources of knowledge are being kept behind hundreds of dollars of money is really sad, because we live. I mean, the essay in the book when experts disagree is all about my anxieties as a voter and not knowing who to believe, and what do I do when two legitimate experts disagree on a subject that I have to vote on. There is so much noise in the culture and politics, cable news, and all these things that can be very ephemeral. You look back on it in a week or a month, and it had no footprint on reality at all, except for that time when it was being talked about. That we should have access to the sources of knowledge. And I love that stuff. That stuff is fascinating. So many great writers.
What's your login?
Honestly, this could be the day that I break down the walls of JSTOR. I'll write it in the book.
So writing takes a lot of effort. You write on writing, and all that comes with it. I'm going to read a little section of the book that I found really exemplifies this. A big undertaking, whether it's writing a novel, starting a business, or nurturing a relationship, requires emotional stability. But our emotions aren't stable. So the best we can do is cultivate a bird's eye view on ourselves to remind us of the colored lenses we're seeing through. Eventually, the reflex to that view becomes automatic, and that's especially helpful when I'm at my lowest, about to trash my progress or make a decision I'll regret, or succumb to the gloom in my head. With all the poise I can muster, I wait for the clouds to pass. There are more bad hours than bad days, and pick up the thread again. How's the view today?
It's pretty good sitting right here. I mean, that last essay is all about the emotional gauntlet of doing creative work and how it's mixed up with a lot of self-loathing. And it's kind of inescapable, I think. And at least it has been for me. And that feeling of looking back over your work after writing and just hating it. It's hard. Writing or doing a lot of work helps with that, because you start to realize that that's just one part of the cycle of your moods. And if you can just hold on when you're feeling like shit, you can get to that part where you're feeling good again. And it will always go around and around. I imagine I'm not alone here when I say that I suffer from imposter syndrome like everybody. As I was writing this book, you get so close to it, you think, is it good? Like, what, am I actually doing something of value here? And then I got such great feedback from Stephanie and the people at Simon Schuster and Adrian, the publisher, and from my wife and the people who were reading it early, But they're all connected to me, It's like they want to make me feel good, So you still have that doubt lingering in your head. And it's really seeing you guys here and seeing the response on Twitter and hearing from people that's getting me to the place where I'm starting to think that there might be some value in this. And it is all because of you guys. And I so appreciate that. It's never easy to do creative work, but looking back on it after having finished has been really, really gratifying.
Thanks so much, Evan. We're gonna open it up to some questions.
Questions? Who's got a question? Right here in the front.
You say
We
that.
have a microphone, so we will walk to you with a mic.
Okay. I can also repeat.
Hey, so you say that good ideas are when two ideas smash into each other, and I can't find that more true, because my favorite ideas that I've ever had that feel unique and feel like I can put them into the world are those ones where I have one but it's not strong, and then something randomly smashes into it. But I also know that the way to get better at building out concepts is to do them over and over again.
Yeah.
And as like a perfectionist person that doesn't want to put things out into the world unless they are the like most defined, distilled version of what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. It is scary and weird to build out a concept that hasn't been smashed into yet. So,
Yeah.
do you make everything from the first the first thought that has not had that other thing run into it, and then it eventually builds out into something bigger, and then something eventually falls from the sky and hits it and splinters off and then becomes a new thing? Or how do you force good congealed ideas?
I mean, there's the essay in the book about, one of the essays in the book is about the internet essay. I talk about how the internet is trying to claim every appointment on your mind's timeline. And so there is so little time for you to just sit and do nothing. One way that idea, for me at least, for ideas to it's usually when I'm doing laundry, right? Because that's or in the shower, the only times in the day when I'm not an input for the internet. So one way to get those ideas to smash together is to just sort of sit and, do nothing and let your mind do the weird things that it's going to do. But in terms of developing those ideas like you're talking about, you just kind of have to start. Yeah, a lot of times I just start, right? Like for the Lord of the Rings essay, one huge piece of it was this idea from Albert Camus about the absurd and how our minds are predisposed to look for meaning in the world, objective meaning like God, and a universe that can't provide that, and that is what he called absurd. And I separately had this idea about Lord of the Rings, that it was this world in which I was getting to live out some of the meaning that I didn't see in the real world. And as I was writing that piece, it was this other thing that was in the back of my mind, Camus, that came into it. It's sort of like I have written a little fiction, it's not good, but I have written. And some fiction writers talk about the experience of characters just speaking for themselves. It's sort of like that. When you are writing or are trying to put ideas together, special things will happen when you're just doing it, as opposed to when you're at just a standstill. And so that's the best advice I have. It's hard,
Yeah.
It's hard.
Thanks.
Who else?
Him right there?
Awesome. Well, I want to start by saying thanks for coming out. And you said it feels surreal watching all of us. I'm sure it feels the same. When I started watching you a decade ago,
Wow.
overseas with
Wow.
crappy Wi-Fi, so it's surreal for me too. But
Thank you.
my question is: you talked about how you generate ideas. How have you noticed your use of language and communicating those ideas has changed throughout the beginning to now of your career?
I think the key development has been simplicity. When I was writing this book, the great thing that YouTube does for creators is that it makes you hypersensitive to the audience. That can go a lot of different ways, because the audience, you don't want the audience to determine what you do, I believe, but you should always keep them in mind. And because you are the attention that you need to keep on YouTube is so fragile, there's always the next thing to click on. You have to be aware of what you're doing with the attention of the audience. And so doing YouTube for a decade, since those bad Wi-Fi days, is taught me to be sensitive to when you're actually being engaging to people. And in writing, video that has certain applications, but in writing, I think that is a lot about simplicity and making sure that you're not necessarily complicating what you want to say, because you can communicate something very complex with lots of simple pieces. And that's how my language has evolved, and I have YouTube to thank for that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Somewhere over here, yeah, over here. Over here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we got another microphone. We got another microphone.
Oh, what do you know about that? Hi. Like the gentleman over there, it's very surreal to see you as a flesh and blood person.
Am I?
I've been watching you since I was, what, like 12?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
So like the relationship I have with you as a consumer of your videos is very similar to the one you described as having with Emerson. So
Oh, that's so
thank
sweet.
you for
Thank
that. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. Great work, yeah. My question is, how do you, because you talk about being such a perfectionist, like, how do you know when a video is finished or when a script is finished? And another question is, did you like the Sandman Netflix series?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a great question, and the only way you can know, I can know when something is done is when I hit publish, because it's not done. I could spend a lot more time on it, like YouTube forces you to put things out, and I think that's good, because I have a problem with finishing. And there are lots of things on my computer, lots of things that are in process that will never get finished because all I want to do is keep tweaking. And working on this book was just, if you're a tweaker, it's the best thing ever. And so I don't know if I found the right answer to that, but I think you have to finish, you have to put it out, because you cannot diagnose what was wrong with it until you do that. And perfectionism, it will stop you from, improving in the way that you need to improve. Can I do no comment on the Sandman? I love the sound of this episode so much. Made me cry. Right here up front.
Hi, thank you for all the things you do. I do think your videos are precious. You mentioned that they are, but I do think they are. I'm a high school bio teacher here in Harlem, and I think that it's kind of unfair that you can do so much in 5.5, 8 minutes, like the Mu major chord or the Vaz episode. And you spoke a little bit about the simplicity of transmitting an idea. What's that process look like for you? How do you get something where, I'm sure you spend hours of research on something, but you have to bring it down to a level where not only is it engaging, like high school biology, I try to, but in a way that you're walking away with it saying, I did all the work I had to do beforehand, and now the audience gets it.
Yeah, I think for the Nerdwriter specifically, it's, let me just talk about the essay generally, because I'm doing the essay sort of in both different places. The essay is not really a comprehensive, fully formed treatise on a subject. It can only really be an inquiry into something. And so I don't promise on YouTube and on the Nerdwriter to fully explain something, because then it just balloons and it becomes something else. It becomes what you're doing, which is actually really extremely valuable, teaching in a systematic way. I can't do that on YouTube in the form that I do. But I have the advantage of shortening things to a digestible time. And the way I do that is by, like you say, researching and reading for hours and days, and letting structure sort of bubble up in my head. The Nerdwriter is completely 100% me explaining these things to myself. I do not know about what these things are before I start. Sometimes I do, but most of the time I don't. And because I think I have a slow-ish brain for logic, right? And that means it takes me a little longer to get things, but the advantage is that when they do come together, it's much more solid. Because if there's any hole or gap in that, I'm really sensitive to it, and so I try to put that in the video. But I guess my one piece of advice is to try to explain it to yourself as best you can to the satisfaction of yourself. And communicate the enthusiasm you have. I mean, that's the other big piece. And that's something I learned from teachers I had, professors I had. You know, in the book I say that I declared an archaeology minor at college because of one guy. That was not on my radar, but he was so obsessed with archaeology that I just was infected with that. I was infected with that enthusiasm. And so people definitely respond to obsession and enthusiasm in you. And I try to communicate my excitement about things because I genuinely am, and I think that is infectious. I hope that answers the question.
Yes.
Let's get someone in the back. Yeah, there. I don't want to bias towards the front.
Hello.
Hi.
Probably a hard question to answer, but
Let's do
if
it.
you could pick one of these essays or any topic from your YouTube filmography that you could turn into an entire treatise, entire book, or a movie, you can
Wow.
only choose one. So.
Oh my God! It's how amazing that you've asked this question because I have been talking to Stephanie, and if I get the chance to write another book, which will depend on if people buy this one, I would love to do a single subject nonfiction. Because writing, the Nerdwriter scripts are about 800 to 1,000 words usually. The shortest one in this book was 4,000, the longest one was 8,000. And so getting to expand on something is addicting. And I found myself thinking many times, oh, I want to do a whole book about this. So let me think. Well, I mean, getting to write a whole book about Lord of the Rings would be cool, but and that'll just never end. That'll never stop being an obsession. But okay. So the benches one is a great example. Like I started with benches. I'm sitting on benches, people watching, having these great moments of peace, and then it turned in, you just started digging, and it turned into this whole thing about urban planning, and I'm like, whoa, this is obviously a huge subject. And then Barcelona started to just change because the mayor is implementing the Superblock project, and it was all happening in front of me, and I was like, wow, because I love interior design, I also love exterior design. I just love design, and I love the way spaces make you feel. I'm sensitive to that, and I love that, and I love that about certain cities and certain interiors, and so I'd love to write a whole book on urban planning in cities. Do you accept that idea right now? And yell's the name.
I'm gonna go back to work tomorrow and say, well, I signed up at this next book.
Perfect. Let's get over here. Yeah. Right, the mic. Hey.
Hey, so I'm here with my brother, and he asked me what exactly he hasn't. Sorry, I wrote him along, but he's with your YouTube channel, and he kind of asked me what the nature of the channel is, and honestly, he just talks about stuff. It's a little hard to describe.
I'm trying to say that.
Yeah, so I've seen your videos about Las Meninas or my notes, and oh, I guess he has a background in art history, and then you talk about Donald Trump's speech patterns, and I guess you have a history of I guess you have a background in linguistics, but when you talk about writing a long form book about one of these essays, or YouTube, or I guess your background in film production, I guess my question is what is your medium? Where do you see this in going if you have interests in lots of different things, and you've obviously explored the media? What is next? How do you? Is there an umbrella on which you? Yeah.
It's a great question. I mean, I love doing YouTube, and I will continue to do it for the reason that it is still a really fun challenge to figure out what YouTube can do as a new medium. But writing this book over the last year and a half, I've sort of, I think, found my ideal working environment. Some people like to work in teams with lots of people. I like to be in a room by myself, working on paragraphs. And so I would like to write more. I mean, more books, and that is the immediate thing that I would like to do next, while continuing to do the Nerdwriter. But you know, I love movies. I would love, you know, it's if you have an idea that fits the form. The cool thing about my job is that it's kind of like an opportunity generator. And people ask me what I want to do next, which they never did when I started. Like, no one cared what I wanted to do when I started. Now they do, and so it is cool to think about the different types of things that could happen in different media. A documentary, I think, would be really cool. I would love to do that. It's sort of like the equivalent of doing a single subject nonfiction essay to full feature size. That would be really cool. But I would really like to write another book. So tell your friends. Here, let's do here. Yeah.
Unfortunately, this will have to be our last question.
No.
Hi, long-time listener, first-time call.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of your videos on animation. Sort of Akira's depiction of light and Ghost of Shadow Space. I was wondering about both, and also coming right with your movie on the average, the increase in average cinema and the lack of truth of storytelling in that. I feel they're sort of contrast to each other. So I was wondering about the feelings about the current state of animation in cinema and television.
It's a great question. I mean, I am a relative novice in anime. I like to watch. I've watched a lot of it, but there is so much of it that it's hard not to be an expert on it. You know, it's a good question. I mean, I obviously love most of the Pixar, you know, Disney animation stuff. But Fox actually released a video yesterday, I think, about how the recent Spider-Man, the Spider-Verse, sort of changed the direction of prestige animation. That was a really cool. That's obviously an amazing movie and a really cool direction for it to go. I've been focusing a lot on comics recently, which is sort of like the first thing, and I've been trying to up my manga knowledge. You know, so I read all of Berserk, and I'm reading One Piece now, and I'm trying to like kind of get into that world because it's so fascinating to me. But there's still so much more for me to learn. So I don't know if I can give a full, complete, good answer on that, but obviously I'm a huge fan of those movies you mentioned, Akira, Ghost of the Shell, and yeah, I need to watch a lot more. Let's do one more. Come on, let's do one more. One more question, please. Over here, right at the front. Oh, we got a mic.
So, I feel like in the past 10 years, you've pretty vastly changed the way I think about a lot of things. The one thing I think you do really well is you allow people to experience your perspective. Like, I think about the intensity that you feel in your chest when you look at a Jackson Pollock that you explained, or the very beautiful complexity of a Bon Iver song. And those things I think are added to because you can hear it or you can see it. You can't quite do that in the exact same way in a book. How does that process change for you?
Totally. What a great question, because as a YouTuber, I have so many tools, and I often say that it's like when I'm talking about a movie, what I'm trying to do is not necessarily not completely explain the thing I'm trying to explain, but also communicate that feeling I had. And it's like, if you know, a great analogy is if you know lighting on film sets, the lighting on the set looks nothing like the lighting in the movie. But there is a relationship there that gaffers know. I'm trying to create that same kind of alchemy in the video to bring you to the same place. It's not just about saying word for word, explaining what I believe. It's about bringing all these things together. And I have those tools. I have the film's soundtrack. I have, clips from the movie. I have music. I have, the way I intone certain parts of the voiceover. For the book, it's just a whole different challenge. And I love that challenge because you can get to that place. There are writers, and I've mentioned some of them tonight, who can get through prose as much as someone could get through audiovisual means. And it is just a different toolbox. You will all be the judge of whether I did that in this book, but that is what I tried to do, solve that puzzle. And it was so much fun. That's why I want to do more.
You're Sandra Reed.
Thank you everybody so much for coming.